Captain Jake Morrison stood at the big window of his spaceship. He watched the alien space station grow bigger as they got closer. The station looked like it was made of crystal and metal. It spun slowly around a huge gas planet with two bright suns shining on it. This was the first time humans had been invited to visit an alien research station. Jake felt nervous. He was representing all of humanity today. That was a big responsibility. "Captain, we're getting a message from the station," said Lisa Park. She worked at the communications desk. The main screen lit up. An alien face appeared. The creature looked like a giant insect with 4 eyes. Its name was Dr. Veltar. He was the chief scientist at the station. "Welcome, humans," Dr. Veltar said through the translation machine. "We are very curious about your species. We have heard interesting stories about how you deal with dangerous animals. Your reputation is known in many star systems." Jake raised his eyebrow. "What kind of reputation?" "We have heard that humans can survive encounters with predators that would kill most other intelligent beings. We have a particular creature here that has puzzled our researchers for many months. Perhaps you would be willing to take a look." Jake thought about this. He had always been good with animals back on Earth, even the dangerous ones. "We'd be happy to help if we can." 20 minutes later, Jake walked through the clean white hallways of the alien station. Dr. Veltar walked beside him. Also with them were Dr. Amy Collins, who studied alien life forms, and Ryan Burke, who was in charge of security. The station was amazing. The walls seemed to be alive, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. The floors felt warm under their feet and seemed to respond when they walked on them. "The creature arrived 6 months ago," Dr. Veltar explained as they walked toward a large containment area. "A trader brought it from the Outer Rim territories. He said it was gentle and calm. But 3 of our animal handlers were killed before we could put it to sleep with drugs. Since then, it has been completely impossible to control." They stopped in front of a thick window. Jake looked through it and saw something that took his breath away. Inside the chamber was a creature the size of a small house. It looked like a cross between a tiger and a dragon. Its fur was black as midnight with bright blue patterns that glowed and pulsed like lightning. It had 6 powerful legs that ended in huge claws. The claws were so sharp they left deep scratches in the metal floor. But what really caught Jake's attention were its eyes. They glowed with a strange light, but more importantly, they looked intelligent. The creature paced back and forth in the large room like a caged animal. But there was something about the way it moved that reminded Jake of something from back home on Earth. "We call it a Vorthak," Dr. Veltar continued. "They come from a death world in the Rim territories. This one has killed 17 beings from 5 different species. Even our most experienced animal trainers refuse to go near it." Dr. Collins stepped closer to the window. Her scientific curiosity was obvious. "It's beautiful." "What kind of world does it come from?" "Volcanic plains with electromagnetic storms. The species evolved to hunt in nearly impossible conditions. According to every expert we have consulted, they are completely impossible to tame." Jake watched the creature move. Despite its huge size, it moved with smooth grace. Something about its behavior seemed familiar to him. The way it paced back and forth, the rhythm of its movement, reminded him of wild horses he had worked with as a boy. "Has anyone tried a different approach?" Jake asked. Dr. Veltar's 4 eyes focused on him with what might have been amusement. "What do you mean, human?" "Well, you've tried to control it with force. But what about trying to gain its trust?" The alien scientist made a clicking sound that the translator turned into laughter. "Trust with a Vorthak? Captain Morrison, that beast is pure killing instinct. It cannot be reasoned with. It cannot be tamed. It exists only to hunt and kill." Jake continued studying the creature. As he watched, it stopped pacing and looked directly at him through the window. For a moment, their eyes met. Jake saw something that surprised him. It wasn't mindless anger. It was intelligence, and maybe even loneliness. "I'd like to try," Jake said quietly. Dr. Veltar's entire body went stiff. "Captain, with all respect, that creature would tear you apart in seconds. We have recorded evidence of how aggressive it is. No intelligent being can safely approach a Vorthak." Ryan Burke stepped forward. "Sir, I have to agree with the doctor. This thing is a killing machine." But Jake was remembering his childhood on the farms of Montana. He remembered working with wild horses that everyone said couldn't be broken. He could hear his grandfather's words in his mind. "Every creature understands kindness, Jake. Sometimes you just have to speak their language." "I understand the risks," Jake said. "But I think you're wrong about this creature. I don't think it's mindless at all. I think it's scared and alone. I think it's acting aggressively because that's the only way it knows how to communicate in this environment. Dr. Veltar's 4 eyes blinked rapidly. Scared? Captain, this is one of the most dangerous predators in known space. So are grizzly bears on Earth, Jake replied. But we've learned to live alongside them. Sometimes the most dangerous creatures are just the most misunderstood. He turned to face the alien scientist directly. Give me a chance. If I'm wrong, you'll have proof that humans are foolish. If I'm right, maybe we can all learn something new. The alien researcher was quiet for a long time. His strange face was hard to read. Finally, he spoke. Captain Morrison, what you're suggesting is suicide. That beast cannot be tamed, but if you're truly willing to risk your life for this experiment, I will not stop you. Your species has a reputation for surviving impossible situations. Perhaps this will help us understand why. Jake stared at the magnificent creature beyond the thick barrier. He felt a familiar stirring in his chest. It was the same feeling he'd had as a boy when approaching a wild stallion, that everyone said was too dangerous to handle. Sometimes the most important connections weren't made through force, but through understanding. The creature had stopped pacing and was now sitting on its haunches, still watching Jake through the window. The blue patterns on its fur were pulsing more slowly now, almost like a calm heartbeat. There's something else, Jake said. Look at how it's sitting. That's not the posture of a mindless killer. That's the posture of an intelligent being who's trying to figure us out just as much as we're trying to figure it out. Dr. Collins nodded slowly. He's right. The body language doesn't match what we'd expect from a simple predator. Dr. Veltar looked from Jake to the creature and back again. Captain Morrison, if you truly believe you can communicate with this being, I will prepare the necessary safety measures. But I must warn you one final time. What you're proposing has never been attempted. No one has ever tried to approach a Vorthak peacefully. Then maybe it's time someone did, Jake said. As they walked back through the corridors to prepare for the attempt, Jake thought about what he was planning to do. It was dangerous, maybe even crazy, but something deep inside told him it was also right. The creature wasn't evil. It wasn't a monster. It was just a being far from home, trapped in a place where no one understood it. Jake knew that feeling, and he knew that sometimes all it took was one person willing to extend a hand in friendship instead of raising it in anger. Tomorrow he would find out if he was right. Tomorrow he would step into the cage with one of the most dangerous predators in the galaxy, and maybe, just maybe, he would make a friend. Jake spent the whole night reading everything the aliens had learned about Vorthaks. Dr. Collins sat with him in the research lab. Her laptop was open next to stacks of alien data tablets that glowed softly in the dim light. The blue patterns in their fur aren't just pretty decorations, she explained. She pointed to a moving hologram that showed the creature's electromagnetic readings. They seem to be a way of talking. Look at these frequency readings. They change based on how the creature is feeling. Jake studied the patterns carefully. When the Vorthak was angry or upset, the blue markings pulsed quickly in wild, chaotic patterns. During the short times when it rested, the patterns became slower and more rhythmic, like gentle waves. It's like a mood ring, he said thoughtfully. Or maybe more like body language that we can actually see with our eyes. Dr. Veltar came into the lab. His movements showed he was nervous. Captain Morrison, I must ask one final time. Are you absolutely certain about this course of action? We could arrange for you to observe from a safe distance. Perhaps through remote cameras or drones. Jake shook his head. Distance won't work. If I'm right about this creature, it needs to know that I'm willing to be vulnerable. Trust has to go both ways. But the safety protocols alone, Dr. Veltar began. We'll stay in place, Jake assured him. I'm not being stupid about this. I want medical teams standing by. I want emergency barriers ready to deploy, and I want Ryan with a tranquilizer gun. But I also want room to try something different. The next morning, Jake stood in front of the door to the Vorthak's cage. He had taken off all his armor and weapons. He wore only basic clothing. Nothing that might be seen as threatening. In his hand, he carried only a piece of synthetic meat. It was the closest thing to the creature's natural food they could make. Dr. Collins watched from the observation deck above. Her instruments tracked both Jake's heart rate and breathing, and the electromagnetic patterns flowing across the Vorthak's hide. Dr. Veltar stood beside her. His 4 hands nervously adjusted various controls. Electromagnetic activity is increasing, Dr. Collins reported through the communication system. The creature knows something different is happening. Jake approached the inner door. Through the thick window, he could see the Vorthak had stopped its endless pacing. It was watching him with those strange, intelligent eyes. "Remember," Jake said softly into his communicator, "no sudden movements from anyone unless I'm actually being attacked. Let me work." The airlock made a hissing sound as it opened. Jake stepped into the enclosure. The Vorthak was even more impressive up close, standing nearly 12 feet tall at the shoulder. Its presence filled the space with raw power. The blue patterns across its fur were pulsing rapidly now, creating an almost hypnotic light show. Jake could feel the electromagnetic field it generated as a subtle tingling across his skin. He stopped about 20 feet from the creature and slowly sat down, cross-legged on the floor. He made himself as small and non-threatening as possible. The Vorthak tilted its massive head, clearly puzzled by this behavior. "Easy, big guy," Jake said softly. His voice carried the same gentle tone he had used with frightened horses. "I'm not here to hurt you." The creature took a step closer. Its claws clicked against the metal floor. Up close, Jake could see that its eyes weren't just glowing. They had depth and intelligence that reminded him more of a dolphin or elephant than a simple predator. Jake held out the piece of synthetic meat. He kept his movements slow and careful. The Vorthak's nostrils flared as it caught the scent. The electromagnetic patterns across its hide shifted to a slower, more curious rhythm. "That's interesting." Dr. Collins' voice came through his earpiece. "The electromagnetic signature is changing. It's shifting from aggressive patterns to something we've never recorded before." The Vorthak moved closer, now only 10 feet away. Jake could feel the heat coming from its massive body. He could smell its distinctive scent. It was like the smell of the air after lightning, mixed with something wild and clean. "I know you understand more than they think you do," Jake said quietly. "You're not just some mindless killing machine, are you? You're smart, and you're lonely, and you're stuck in a box with a bunch of beings who are afraid of you." The creature's head lowered until it was at Jake's eye level. This close, Jake could see the individual strands of fur and the complex patterns of light that flowed beneath the surface like slow lightning. Instead of reaching out, Jake simply sat still and let the Vorthak investigate him. The creature's breathing was deep and steady. Jake found himself unconsciously matching the rhythm. The electromagnetic patterns were shifting again, becoming more synchronized, almost like a shared heartbeat. "Captain," Dr. Veltar's voice was tight with worry. "Its electromagnetic output is synchronizing with your biological rhythms." "We've never seen anything like this." Jake smiled slightly. "I think that's the point, Doc. I think these patterns are how Vorthaks communicate their feelings. It's been trying to tell you how it feels this whole time." The creature moved closer still until Jake could feel its breath on his face. Those intelligent eyes studied him with an intensity that was almost human. Then, very slowly, the Vorthak lowered its massive head and gently touched its nose to Jake's outstretched hand. The moment of contact sent a visible pulse of blue light across the creature's entire body. But instead of the chaotic, aggressive patterns they had recorded before, this pulse was steady, rhythmic, almost peaceful. "My God," Dr. Collins whispered over the communication system. "Jake, the electromagnetic signature has completely changed. It's almost like a cat purring." Jake smiled and slowly, carefully placed his other hand on the creature's snout. The Vorthak didn't pull away. Instead, those electric blue patterns seemed to flow more gently across its fur. For the first time since its arrival at the station, the great predator seemed truly calm. "See?" Jake said softly, speaking as much to the Vorthak as to the observers above. "You just needed someone to listen." The Vorthak made a sound Jake had never heard before. It was deep and rumbling, but not threatening. It sounded almost like contentment. "Jake," Dr. Collins called out excitedly, "the creature is producing vocalizations we've never recorded. The frequency suggests communication rather than aggression." Jake continued to sit with the creature, both hands now resting gently on its massive head. The Vorthak's eyes were half closed, and the blue patterns across its body had settled into a slow, rhythmic pulse. "What's your name, big guy?" Jake asked softly. "I can't keep calling you the creature if we're going to be friends." The Vorthak's eyes opened fully, and it looked directly at Jake. The electromagnetic patterns shifted to something new, something that almost looked like it was trying to communicate a specific idea. "Dr. Collins, are you seeing this?" "Yes, Jake, the patterns are becoming more complex, more structured. It's almost like it's trying to tell you something specific." Jake watched the light show playing across the creature's fur. There was definitely a pattern there, something intentional. I think it's trying to tell me its name. For the next hour, Jake sat with the Vorthak, watching the patterns and slowly beginning to understand that this wasn't just a dangerous animal. This was an intelligent being with thoughts and feelings and maybe even a sense of humor. When Jake finally stood to leave, the Vorthak didn't become aggressive. Instead, it watched him with what could only be described as fondness. The blue patterns on its fur pulsed in a gentle, almost friendly rhythm. "I'll be back tomorrow," Jake promised. "We have a lot more to learn about each other." As he walked through the airlock, Jake felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything he had ever experienced. He had just made first contact not with an alien species, but with an alien individual. And despite all the warnings and fears, it had been one of the most peaceful encounters of his life. Behind him, the Vorthak settled down in the center of its enclosure, its electromagnetic patterns glowing softly in the dim light. For the first time in months, it looked truly at peace. Over the next few days, Jake spent hours in the cage with the Vorthak. Dr. Collins had started calling it Storm because of its electromagnetic patterns. What began as careful contact slowly became real communication, as Jake learned to read the creature's light displays. The fast pulses mean it's alert or curious, Jake explained to Dr. Veltar during one of their daily meetings. The slow wave-like patterns mean it's happy or content, and these sharp angular flashes here mean it's frustrated or angry. Dr. Veltar examined the recorded patterns with growing amazement. In 6 months of study, we never identified this as a communication system. We thought it was just involuntary biological function like a heartbeat. Maybe that's because you were looking at it like scientists instead of like friends, Jake suggested. Storm isn't just a specimen to be studied. It's a person, just a very different kind of person. Dr. Collins looked up from her data analysis. Jake, I think Storm has been trying to tell us something specific. Look at this pattern that keeps repeating when it looks toward the outer windows. The holographic display showed a complex sequence of electromagnetic pulses. It was more complicated than anything they had recorded during emotional states. It repeated with small changes, almost like a song or a spoken sentence. It's not random, Jake said thoughtfully, studying the pattern. It's too organized, too purposeful. Storm, what are you trying to tell us? That afternoon, Jake brought Dr. Veltar into the cage for the first time. The alien scientist was obviously nervous. His 4 hands trembled slightly as he followed Jake through the airlock. Storm looked at the alien with wary intelligence. The electromagnetic pattern shifted to alert curiosity rather than aggression. Jake placed a reassuring hand on the creature's side. Easy, Storm. Dr. Veltar wants to understand you too. To Dr. Veltar's amazement, Storm lowered its head and allowed the scientist to approach. The creature's electromagnetic pattern shifted to the complex repeating sequence Dr. Collins had identified. It's trying to communicate something specific, Dr. Veltar observed. His scientific curiosity was overcoming his fear. These patterns are far too sophisticated to be mere emotional expression. Jake had been thinking about this problem. Storm, when you make these patterns, you always look toward the outer windows. Are you trying to show us something? Something out there in space? Storm's entire body lit up with excited patterns. The creature moved to the viewing port and pressed its face against the thick, transparent material. The electromagnetic display became more intense, more urgent. My God. Dr. Collins's voice came over the communication system from the observation deck. Jake, look at the long-range sensors. The main display screen activated, showing a map of the local star system. Dr. Collins highlighted a section of space beyond the gas giant's orbit. There's something out there. It's faint, but we're detecting electromagnetic signatures that match Storm's communication patterns. Jake felt a chill of understanding run down his spine. Storm, are you trying to tell us there are others? Other Vorthaks? The creature's excitement was unmistakable now. The blue patterns raced across its hide in complex cascades. It began making a sound they had never heard before. It was a deep harmonic rumble that seemed to resonate through the station's hull. Dr. Veltar's compound eyes went wide. That's not aggression. That's calling. It's trying to call to them. How long has Storm been alone? Jake asked. Dr. Veltar consulted his records. The trader who brought it claimed to have found it as the sole survivor of an asteroid mining accident. If there were others, they've been separated from their family, Jake realized. No wonder Storm has been aggressive and hard to manage. Imagine being ripped away from everyone you know and stuck in a cage where no one can understand a word you're saying. Dr. Collins' instruments detected another spike in electromagnetic activity. This one was coming from outside the station. "Jake, we're getting a response. There's definitely something out there and it's answering Storm's call." Storm pressed harder against the viewing port. Its entire body was now pulsing with rhythmic patterns that were clearly communication. The sounds it was making grew more complex, more urgent. "We have to help them reunite," Jake said firmly. Dr. Veltar looked troubled. "Captain Morrison, that would require a significant expedition into an unexplored region of space. And if there are more Vorthax out there, then they're probably just as scared and lost as Storm was," Jake finished. "Dr. Veltar, what if we approach this not as a capture mission, but as a rescue operation? What if instead of trying to contain and study these creatures, we tried to help them?" The alien scientist was quiet for a long moment. He watched Storm's desperate attempts to communicate with its distant family. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a note of wonder. "Captain Morrison, your species continues to surprise us. Most civilizations would see powerful predators as threats to be eliminated, or resources to be exploited, but you see them as individuals deserving of help." Jake smiled and placed his hand on Storm's flank in a gesture that had become familiar. The great creature's electromagnetic patterns shifted to the gentle, peaceful rhythm that meant contentment and trust. "That's because we've learned something important, Dr. Veltar. The most dangerous creatures often just need someone to understand them. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose trust over fear." Storm turned its massive head to look at Jake. In those intelligent eyes, he saw something that needed no translation: gratitude and hope. The next few hours were spent planning. Dr. Veltar contacted the station administrators and explained the situation. At first, they were reluctant to authorize a mission into unexplored space to rescue what they still considered dangerous predators. But Jake's success with Storm had not gone unnoticed. Word had spread throughout the station about the human who had peacefully communicated with the supposedly untamable beast. Scientists from various departments came to observe, and all left convinced that they were dealing with something far more complex than a simple predator. "The electromagnetic signatures are definitely getting stronger," Dr. Collins reported as they continued to monitor the distant signals. "Whatever's out there, it's trying to communicate with Storm across interstellar distances." Storm had not left the viewing port since detecting the signals from its family. It continued to send out complex electromagnetic patterns, and each time it received a response, its excitement grew. "It's heartbreaking," Jake said, watching the creature's obvious distress at being separated from its family. "Imagine if aliens had captured you and taken you away from everyone you loved, and then acted surprised when you became difficult to handle." Dr. Veltar nodded slowly. "We have much to learn from your species, Captain Morrison. Perhaps this is why the universe brought us together." As the day ended, Jake made a promise to Storm. "We're going to find them, big guy. We're going to bring your family home." Storm's electromagnetic patterns shifted to something Jake had learned to recognize as deep gratitude. The creature gently nuzzled Jake's shoulder, a gesture of affection that would have seemed impossible just days before. Tomorrow they would begin preparing for a rescue mission unlike any in recorded history. They were going to venture into unknown space to reunite a family that most beings considered too dangerous to approach. But Jake knew they were doing the right thing. Sometimes the most important missions weren't about conquest or discovery. Sometimes they were simply about bringing someone home. The research ship Cosmic Wind dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of a large asteroid field. Jake stood on the bridge next to Captain Lisa Murphy, watching the computer display as dozens of contacts appeared on screen. "Contact confirmed," reported Ben Carter from the sensor station. "We've got at least 30 Vorthax scattered throughout the asteroid field. They appear to be hiding." Dr. Veltar, who had insisted on joining the mission, studied the readings with fascination. "These electromagnetic patterns are different from Storm's, more fragmented, distressed. Storm had been transported in a specially modified cargo bay with transparent walls. The creature was practically vibrating with excitement. The blue patterns across its hide had been pulsing steadily since they had entered the system. Its harmonic calls echoed through the ship's hull. "They're responding to Storm signals," Dr. Collins observed from her mobile lab setup. "But the responses seem fearful, cautious." Jake thought about this. "They've probably learned to be afraid of ships. If traders have been capturing them, any vessel would represent danger." Captain Murphy nodded. "How do you want to approach this, Jake?" These asteroids are creating a lot of interference, and if these creatures panic, we go slow and we let Storm lead, Jake decided. Storm knows them. If we can establish communication through Storm, maybe we can convince them we're here to help. The next few hours were tense as the cosmic wind carefully moved through the asteroid field. Every few minutes, Storm would send out a long, complex call, and they would receive broken responses from the hidden Vorthax. Gradually, the responses grew stronger and more complete. "I'm detecting movement," Ben reported. 3 contacts approaching from the large asteroid at bearing 27 Mark IV. On the main screen, 3 Vorthax emerged from behind a massive iron-rich asteroid. They were smaller than Storm, and their electromagnetic patterns showed clear signs of distress and poor health. "They're young," Dr. Veltar observed, "probably offspring who survived whatever separated them from the adults." Storm's calls became more urgent, more complex. Jake could see the creature pressing against the transparent walls of its enclosure, desperate to reach the others. "Dr. Collins, can we establish a communication link with Storm's Bay? Let the others hear that it's safe?" Within minutes, Storm's calls were being broadcast from the ship's external speakers. The response was immediate and heartbreaking. A chorus of answering calls rose from throughout the asteroid field, speaking of loneliness, fear, and desperate hope. More Vorthax began emerging from their hiding places among the asteroids. Some were adults, scarred and wary. Others were clearly juveniles, staying close to what Jake assumed were their parents. All of them showed signs of long-term stress and poor nutrition. They've been surviving on asteroid minerals and whatever organic matter they could find, Dr. Collins observed. That's not their natural diet. They're slowly starving. Jake made a decision. "Captain Murphy, can we open the cargo bay doors and extend a docking tube? I want to let Storm go to them." "Jake," Ryan Burke protested over the communication system from his security station. "If you release Storm out there, we might not get it back." "And if those others are hostile?" "They're not hostile, Ryan. They're family." Captain Murphy looked uncertain. "The risk is worth it," Jake finished. "Dr. Veltar, what's your assessment?" The alien scientist had been monitoring the electromagnetic patterns of the approaching Vorthax. Their communication patterns indicate wariness but not aggression. They're curious about Storm. I believe Captain Morrison is correct. These are family groups. "Do it," Jake decided. The cargo bay doors opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Storm shot out into space with a powerful leap that carried it nearly 100 meters, before it caught itself against an asteroid with its claws. The creature's electromagnetic patterns exploded in brilliant displays of joy and excitement as it called to its family. The response was overwhelming. Vorthax poured out of their hiding places throughout the asteroid field. Their own electromagnetic displays created a light show across the dark space between the rocks. Jake watched in wonder as Storm reunited with what were clearly its family members. They touched noses, intertwined tails, and created synchronized light patterns that pulsed across their entire group. "Captain," Ben called out urgently. "We've got new contacts, big ones coming in fast from the outer edge of the field." On screen, 3 massive forms approached. These were Vorthax easily twice Storm's size, their electromagnetic patterns showing intense alertness and potential aggression. "The adults," Dr. Veltar breathed. "The pack leaders." Storm immediately positioned itself between the ship and the approaching giants. Its electromagnetic patterns shifted to what Jake recognized as complex communication. The newcomers slowed, their own patterns becoming less aggressive as Storm seemed to explain the situation. "It's vouching for us," Jake realized. Storm is telling them we're safe. The largest of the adult Vorthax approached the ship directly. Its massive form dwarfed even Storm. It stopped just meters from the open cargo bay and studied the humans visible through the transparent sections of the ship. Its electromagnetic patterns were slower, more deliberate. It was like watching someone speak carefully in a foreign language. "Dr. Collins, are you recording this?" "Every pulse," she confirmed. "Jake, I think it's trying to communicate directly with us. These patterns are incredibly complex, almost like language," Jake finished. "A real language." The great Vorthax continued its electromagnetic display. Gradually, Jake began to see patterns within patterns. There were variations that might indicate different concepts or ideas. It was like watching someone speak in light. "Storm," Jake called out through the ship's external speakers. "Can you translate? Help us understand." Storm moved between the Alpha Vorthax and the ship. Its own patterns became a bridge between the two forms of communication. Slowly, Jake began to understand what the great creature was trying to say. Gratitude, understanding, and something else. An offer, I think, Jake said quietly. It's offering to help us, all of them. Dr. Veltar's four eyes blinked in sequence. Help us with what? Jake smiled as he watched the magnificent creatures gathering around their ship. They were no longer hiding, but openly curious and welcoming. I think we're about to find out that there's a lot more to Vorthax than anyone ever imagined. The Alpha Vorthax electromagnetic patterns shifted to something new. The patterns were incredibly complex, almost like a data transmission. Dr. Collins' instruments went crazy trying to record and analyze the information. Jake, this is incredible, she called out. The electromagnetic patterns aren't just communication. They're also carrying technical data, star charts, navigation information, even what looks like scientific formulas. They're trying to share knowledge with us, Jake realized. They want to help us understand their technology. More Vorthax approached the ship, each one adding their own electromagnetic patterns to the growing chorus of light. The asteroid field was now blazing with bioluminescent displays as the scattered family groups reunited and shared their joy. Captain Morrison, Dr. Veltar said quietly, I believe we have stumbled upon something far greater than a rescue mission. These creatures appear to possess technology and knowledge we never suspected. Jake nodded, watching Storm swim through space toward the ship with several smaller Vorthax following close behind. I think Storm has been trying to tell us all along. We just needed to learn how to listen. The Alpha Vorthax approached the ship's communication array and began a new electromagnetic display. This one was clearly directed at the ship's computers, and within minutes, Dr. Collins was reporting that they were receiving actual data transmissions. Jake, they're uploading star charts. Hundreds of them. These show trade routes, safe passage corridors, and resource locations throughout this entire sector of the galaxy. They're giving us a gift, Jake said. They're sharing their knowledge because we chose to help them instead of capture them. As Storm re-entered the cargo bay, followed by several family members, Jake realized that this mission had become something far more significant than a simple rescue operation. They had made contact with what appeared to be a spacefaring civilization that had been hiding in plain sight, dismissed by most species as mere predators. The real adventure was just beginning. 3 weeks later, Jake stood in the newly built habitat aboard the expanded research station. He watched young Vorthax play in an environment designed to copy their home world. The station had been transformed from a simple research facility into something never seen before, a true meeting place between species. Dr. Veltar approached. His whole attitude completely changed from their first meeting. Where once he had been nervous and doubtful, now he moved with excitement and wonder. The translation system is finally beginning to work, he reported. Storm's electromagnetic patterns are serving as a bridge between their language and ours. We're having actual conversations, Captain Morrison. Jake smiled as he watched Storm interact with the pack's leader. Their electromagnetic displays created beautiful synchronized patterns of light. What have you learned? Everything we thought we knew was wrong, Dr. Veltar admitted. Vorthax aren't simple predators. They're nomadic engineers. They travel between star systems, following electromagnetic storms and mining asteroids for rare minerals. Their entire culture is built around movement and adaptation. Dr. Collins joined them, her excitement barely contained. Jake, you have to see this. Show him, Storm. Storm approached the transparent barrier that separated the habitat from the observation area. Its electromagnetic pattern shifted to a complex sequence that Jake had learned meant watch and learn. Then the great creature moved to a pile of raw materials in the corner of the habitat. These were metals, crystals, and organic compounds that the station's machines had provided. What happened next left Jake speechless. Storm's claws, which he had assumed were only weapons, proved to be incredibly precise tools. The creature began putting together the materials with a skill that matched any engineer Jake had ever seen. Within minutes, it had built a device that hummed with electromagnetic energy. It's a communication relay, Dr. Collins explained. Storm built it in 15 minutes from scrap materials. The pack leader tells us they use these to stay in contact across vast distances of space. Dr. Veltar activated the translation system. Suddenly, Storm's electromagnetic patterns were accompanied by a computer voice. Human friend Jake understands the old ways. Most species see only teeth and claws. You see the mind beneath. Jake felt a surge of emotion. To hear Storm's actual thoughts translated into words he could understand was overwhelming. Storm, why didn't your people try to communicate with other species before? Storm's patterns shifted to what Jake had learned meant deep thought. Others shoot first, ask questions later. Vorthax learned to hide to seem simple, safer to be feared than to be enslaved. The meaning hit Jake like a physical blow. You've been pretending to be mindless predators to protect yourselves. For many generations, came the reply. But humans are different. You chose trust when others chose fear. Pack leader says humans might be worthy of the deep knowledge. Dr. Veltar's compound eyes widened. Deep knowledge? Storm moved to the viewing panel. Its electromagnetic patterns shifted to excitement. Vorthax travel the star paths for 10,000 years. We know the old routes, the hidden worlds, the places where great technologies sleep. We know which stars will die and which will be born. Jake exchanged glances with Dr. Collins. Storm, are you saying your people have been mapping the galaxy for thousands of years? Longer, Storm confirmed. Vorthax remember. We remember when the first ships flew between worlds. We remember the rise and fall of great civilizations. We remember because we survive. Captain Murphy's voice came over the communication system. Jake, you need to see this. We're receiving signals from multiple systems. Long-range sensors are detecting massive electromagnetic signatures. They match Vorthax patterns. On the main display, a three-dimensional map of the local part of the galaxy appeared. Dozens of points pulsed with electromagnetic activity, forming a vast network that stretched across hundreds of light years. The Great Pack, Storm explained. When the small pack is safe, the Great Pack knows. Word spreads along the star paths. They come to see the humans who chose friendship over fear. Dr. Veltar was practically shaking with excitement. Captain Morrison, do you understand what this means? We've made contact with what might be the oldest continuous civilization in the galaxy. Storm's patterns shifted to what Jake recognized as gentle amusement. Not oldest, but perhaps wisest. Vorthax learned that survival means adaptation. You humans show similar wisdom. This is why the Great Pack comes. Over the following hours, ships began arriving in the system. But these weren't metal vessels like human ships. These were living asteroid stations, carved and shaped by Vorthax engineering. Each one carried dozens of the great creatures, representing different specializations and knowledge bases. Jake found himself appointed as humanity's first ambassador to the Vorthax Confederation. It was a role he had never imagined but somehow felt prepared for. As he stood in the station's new meeting chamber, surrounded by creatures that most of the galaxy had dismissed as mindless beasts, he thought about the strange path that had brought him here. Human friend Jake. Storm's voice came through the translation system. The Pack Elders wish to share a memory with you. The chamber's lights dimmed, and suddenly Jake was surrounded by a holographic display unlike anything he had ever seen. It showed the galaxy as it had been thousands of years ago, with trade routes and civilizations that had long since vanished. Then it shifted forward in time, showing the rise and fall of empires, the birth and death of stars, and through it all, the patient movement of the Vorthax packs along the star paths. This is our gift, Storm explained. The long memory, the deep knowledge. We offer it freely to the humans who chose to understand rather than to conquer. Jake felt the weight of history and the promise of the future pressing down on him. Storm, why us? Why humans? Storm's electromagnetic patterns shifted to the gentle rhythm that Jake had learned meant deep affection. Because when the pack leader warned that the beast could not be tamed, you stepped forward anyway. You chose to see the person beneath the claws. In 10,000 years of travel, few species have made that choice. As Jake looked around the chamber at the magnificent creatures that had become not just allies but friends, he realized that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their weapons. It had been their willingness to extend trust even in the face of fear. So what happens now? Jake asked. Storm's response came not just through the translator, but through a display of light patterns that filled the entire chamber with gentle, welcoming illumination. Now, human friend Jake, the real adventure begins. Outside the station, the stars themselves seemed to pulse with promise as the ancient star paths of the Vorthax Confederation opened to humanity for the first time. And at the center of it all, a bond between species that had begun with a simple choice to trust rather than fear continued to grow stronger with each passing day. The beast, as it turned out, had never needed taming at all. It had only needed understanding. And in learning to understand Storm, humanity had gained access to knowledge and friendship that would change their place in the galaxy forever. Jake placed his hand on Storm's flank one more time, feeling the gentle pulse of the electromagnetic patterns that had become as familiar as a heartbeat. In those patterns he could read contentment, hope, and the promise of adventures yet to come among the stars. 6 months had passed since the first contact with the Vorthak Confederation, and the research station had grown into a bustling hub of interspecies cooperation. Jake walked through corridors that now echoed with the harmonic calls of Vorthaks, alongside the voices of humans and other alien species, who had come to witness this unprecedented alliance. The transformation was remarkable. What had started as a simple rescue mission had evolved into the galaxy's first truly integrated interspecies community. Humans worked alongside Vorthaks on engineering projects that neither species could have imagined alone. "Jake," Dr. Collins called out as she approached from the main laboratory, "you need to see what Storm and the engineering team have accomplished." Jake followed her to the expanded workshop area, where a mixed team of humans and Vorthaks was working on something extraordinary. In the center of the room stood a device that seemed to bend light around itself, creating a shimmer in the air like heat waves. Storm looked up from the device, its electromagnetic patterns shifting to excitement. Through the translation system, its voice carried clear pride. "Human friend Jake, we have built the first hybrid technology. Human computer systems merged with Vorthak electromagnetic engineering." Dr. Veltar approached. His 4 hands clasped in what Jake had learned was a gesture of amazement among his people. "Captain Morrison, this device can create stable wormholes for instantaneous communication across galactic distances. The implications are staggering." Jake examined the device more closely. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, combining human precision electronics with the organic flowing designs that characterized Vorthak technology. "How does it work?" Storm's patterns shifted to the teaching mode Jake recognized. "Vorthaks understand electromagnetic fields that your science calls impossible. Humans understand digital processing that Vorthaks find fascinating. Together, we create new possibilities." A younger Vorthak, one that Storm had introduced as its offspring Swift Current, approached with its own electromagnetic patterns pulsing rapidly. Through the translator, its voice was higher, more energetic than Storm's. "Human friend Jake, the Great Pack sends word. The Galactic Council has requested a meeting." Jake felt a chill of anticipation. The Galactic Council was the governing body of the major spacefaring civilizations. For them to request a meeting meant that word of the Human Vorthak Alliance had spread far beyond this single system. "What kind of meeting?" Jake asked. Storm's patterns became more serious. "The Council is concerned. They have believed for thousands of years that Vorthaks are dangerous beasts. Now they learn we are people. They fear what this means for their understanding of the galaxy." Dr. Veltar nodded gravely. "The political implications are enormous, Captain Morrison. If the Vorthaks are truly an ancient civilization that has been dismissed and hunted as animals, it calls into question many assumptions about galactic history." Jake thought about this. "Some of the Council species have probably been hunting and capturing Vorthaks for generations, haven't they?" "Yes," Storm confirmed. "The Kitharan people, Dr. Veltar's species, are actually among the better ones. They at least study rather than simply destroy. But others..." The electromagnetic patterns shifted to something that needed no translation: pain and anger. "The hegemony has used captured Vorthaks in their gladiator arenas for centuries," Dr. Veltar added quietly. "The Trade Federation has sold them as exotic pets to wealthy collectors. If the galaxy learns that these were actually intelligent beings, there's going to be a reckoning," Jake finished. Over the next few days, representatives from various species began arriving at the station. Jake found himself thrust into the role of not just an ambassador, but a mediator between civilizations that had unknowingly committed what amounted to genocide. The first to arrive was Ambassador Kresh from the hegemony, a tall armored being with multiple arms and a voice like grinding metal. He stood in the main conference room looking skeptically at Storm, who had insisted on being present for all diplomatic meetings. "You expect me to believe that this creature is intelligent?" Kresh asked through his translator. "My people have fought these beasts in our arenas for generations. They show nothing but animal cunning." Storm's electromagnetic patterns flared briefly with anger. before settling into the controlled rhythm Jake recognized as diplomatic speech. Honored Kresh, your people capture young Vorthax, separate them from their families, torture them in cages, and then force them to fight for their lives. What behavior would you expect under such circumstances? The translator rendered Storm's electromagnetic communication into perfectly clear speech. Ambassador Kresh stepped backward, his armored carapace clicking in what Jake had learned was a sign of shock among his species. It spoke to me directly, Kresh stammered. Storm is a fully sentient being with advanced engineering knowledge, cultural traditions, and family bonds, Jake explained calmly. The Vorthax are not animals. They're people who have been hiding their intelligence to survive. The arrival of Ambassador Thys from the Trade Federation brought new complications. The snake-like being coiled nervously in her specialized chair, her scales shifting color in patterns that indicated distress. If these creatures are truly intelligent, she hissed, then my people have been committing slavery for centuries. The legal and ethical implications are something we'll need to address, Jake agreed. But right now, the important thing is moving forward. The Vorthax don't want revenge. They want recognition and cooperation. Storm's patterns shifted to the diplomatic mode. The Great Pack has discussed this extensively. We understand that many species acted from ignorance rather than malice. What matters now is what you choose to do with new knowledge. Dr. Veltar had been quietly observing the meetings from the side of the room. Now he stepped forward. If I may, Captain Morrison, I believe the Vorthax are offering something unprecedented. Forgiveness in exchange for recognition. Swift Current approached the group, its youthful electromagnetic patterns bright with enthusiasm. Human friend Jake, may I share a truth about Vorthax philosophy? Jake nodded encouragingly. Vorthax believe that wisdom comes from adaptation. Species that cannot adapt to new information do not survive. We offer other species the chance to adapt to the truth about us. Those who choose adaptation will find us valuable allies. Those who do not. The patterns shifted to something that needed no translation. Ambassador Kresh straightened to his full height. And what of justice for past wrongs? Storm's response was immediate. Justice is species learning to do better. Justice is young Vorthax growing up free instead of in cages. Justice is the galaxy becoming a place where beings are judged by their actions, not their appearance. Jake felt a surge of pride watching Storm handle the diplomatic negotiations with such grace. The creature that had once been dismissed as a mindless predator was proving to be a more skilled diplomat than many of the galactic representatives. The question, Jake said, addressing the room, is whether the galactic community is ready to acknowledge that they've been wrong about an entire species. And more importantly, whether they're ready to build something better. Ambassador Thys coiled tighter in her chair. And if we refuse? If some species cannot accept this new reality? Storm's electromagnetic patterns shifted to something Jake had never seen before. Something that spoke of vast age and patient wisdom. Then they will find themselves increasingly isolated as the galaxy moves forward without them. The age of dismissing beings as monsters based on their appearance is ending. The age of true interspecies cooperation is beginning. Jake smiled as he watched the alien ambassadors grapple with this new reality. The beast that couldn't be tamed had just offered to help tame the galaxy itself, transforming it into something more just and understanding than it had ever been before. The formal session of the Galactic Council convened 3 weeks later on the neutral station of Harmony Point. Jake stood in the vast chamber, looking up at the tiered seating where representatives from 47 different species had gathered. It was the largest assembly in galactic history, and it was all focused on a question that would reshape interstellar civilization. Storm floated beside him in a specialized environmental suit that allowed it to survive in the station's atmosphere while still displaying its electromagnetic patterns. The sight of a Vorthax in the council chambers had caused quite a stir among species that had never seen one outside of captivity. The chair recognizes Captain Jake Morrison of Earth. Speaking on behalf of the Vorthax Confederation, announced the ancient ethereal who served as council moderator. The being was thousands of years old and had overseen countless diplomatic crises, but even it seemed shaken by the magnitude of this revelation. Jake stepped forward to address the assembly. Honored representatives, we gather today not to assign blame for past mistakes, but to chart a course for a better future. The Vorthax have offered us a gift, the chance to learn from our errors and build a galaxy based on understanding rather than fear. A ripple of electromagnetic interference ran through the chamber as Storm's patterns shifted to amplify Jake's words. The translation systems throughout the room picked up the nuanced emotional content of the Vorthak communication, adding layers of meaning to the simple words. Representative Vex of the Talon Empire rose from his perch, his bird-like features sharp with skepticism. You ask us to believe that creatures we have long considered animals are actually an advanced civilization. Yet these Vorthaks have shown no evidence of space travel, no cities, no technology as we understand it. Storm's patterns shifted to what Jake recognized as gentle amusement. Honored Vex, your understanding of technology is limited by your own perspective. Vorthaks do not build ships because we do not need them. We do not build cities because we prefer the freedom of movement. We have developed along different paths than other species. The chamber erupted in murmurs as delegates tried to process this concept. Jake gestured for quiet. The Vorthaks have agreed to demonstrate their technological capabilities, he announced. With the Council's permission, Storm will show you what Vorthak engineering can accomplish. The moderator nodded, and Storm moved to the center of the chamber floor. The creature's electromagnetic patterns began to pulse in complex sequences, and gradually, the chamber's lights dimmed as Storm's bioluminescence took over. What happened next left the entire assembly speechless. Storm's patterns weren't just creating light. They were interfacing directly with the station's computer systems. Within minutes, holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber, showing star charts, technical diagrams, and historical records that no one had ever seen before. This is a map of the galaxy as it existed 10,000 years ago, Storm explained, its electromagnetic patterns painting pictures in the air. Vorthaks remember because we were there. We witnessed the rise of the First Coalition, the fall of the Crystal Dynasties, and the birth of worlds you now call ancient. The historical data was staggering. Civilizations that Council archaeologists had spent centuries trying to understand were laid out in perfect detail. Trade routes that had been forgotten for millennia were mapped with precision. The accumulated knowledge of ages was being shared freely. Ambassador Thais from the Trade Federation uncoiled in her chair, her scales shifting to colors that indicated deep thought. This information, it would revolutionize our understanding of galactic history. Why share it with us? Storm's patterns shifted to what Jake had learned meant profound sincerity. Because knowledge shared grows stronger. Because cooperation creates possibilities that isolation never could. Because the time for hiding is past. Representative Kresh from the hegemony stood slowly, his massive form towering over the other delegates. And what of those of us who have wronged your people? What compensation do you demand? No compensation, Storm replied immediately. But cooperation. Your gladiator arenas could become cultural exchange centers. Your hunting preserves could become nature sanctuaries. Your weapons could become tools. The choice is yours. Dr. Veltar had been given a place among the delegates as the scientist who had first documented Vorthak intelligence. Now he rose to speak. Honored Council, in all my years of research, I have never encountered a species so willing to forgive past injuries in favor of future cooperation. The Vorthaks are offering us a chance to evolve beyond our current limitations. Jake watched the faces, and various alien features, of the delegates as they grappled with this new reality. Some looked amazed, others appeared frightened, and a few seemed calculating how this knowledge could benefit their own species. There is something else, Storm announced, its patterns shifting to excitement. The Great Pack has discovered something that concerns all species in this galaxy. New holographic displays appeared, showing the outer rim of the galaxy. But there was something wrong with the images. Dark spaces where stars should have been, empty regions that seemed to be growing. An extragalactic force approaches, Storm explained. Something that consumes worlds and leaves only darkness. The Vorthaks have been tracking its progress for decades. It will reach the outer colonies within 50 years. The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates shouted questions and demands for more information. Jake raised his hand for silence. This is why the Vorthaks have chosen to reveal themselves now, he said. They know that no single species can face this threat alone. But together, with combined knowledge and technology, we might find a way to survive. Storm's electromagnetic patterns filled the chamber with urgent intensity. Vorthaks offer their knowledge, their technology, their cooperation. But time grows short. The galaxy must choose, work together or face extinction separately. The ancient ethereal moderator had remained silent throughout the demonstration, but now it spoke with a voice that carried the weight of millennia. This assembly stands at a crossroads. We can cling to old prejudices and face the future divided, or we can embrace a new understanding and face it united. Representative Vex of the Talon Empire was the first to respond. If what you say is true, then my people owe the Vorthax a debt that can never be repaid. But we can begin by offering our full cooperation in this defense effort. One by one, other delegates rose to speak. The Crystalline Collective offered their manufacturing capabilities. The Nomad fleets pledged their mobility and scouting networks. The Garden Worlds promised food and resources for any refugees. Jake felt a surge of hope as he watched former enemies and strangers come together in the face of a common threat. This was what Storm had been working toward. Not just recognition for the Vorthax, but unity for the entire galaxy. The motion before the Council, announced the moderator, is formal recognition of the Vorthak Confederation as a sovereign civilization with full rights and privileges. All in favor? Lights began appearing throughout the chamber as delegates voted. Jake held his breath watching the count climb. When the final tally was announced, it was unanimous. Every species had voted in favor. Storm's electromagnetic patterns exploded in a display of joy and gratitude that needed no translation. For the first time in thousands of years, the Vorthax would no longer need to hide. But as Jake looked at the displays showing the approaching darkness from beyond the galaxy, he knew that this recognition was just the beginning. The real test of this new alliance would come when they faced the unknown threat together. The beast that couldn't be tamed had just united the galaxy. Now they would discover if that unity was strong enough to save it. 2 years later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the massive defense station called Unity's Edge, watching the combined fleets of 47 species prepare for humanity's greatest test. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Human steel and electronics merged with Vorthak electromagnetic systems, crystalline manufacturing precision, and ethereal energy manipulation. Storm floated beside him, its electromagnetic patterns displaying a calm confidence that Jake wished he could share. The great Vorthak had grown even larger over the past 2 years, reaching the size of the ancient pack leaders. But more importantly, it had become something unprecedented, the first truly interspecies diplomat in galactic history. Human friend Jake feels worry, Storm observed, its patterns shifting to gentle concern. The preparations are thorough. The alliance holds strong, Jake nodded, though his eyes remained fixed on the approaching darkness visible on the long-range scanners. The extragalactic threat had arrived ahead of schedule, consuming 3 outer rim colonies before the galaxy could mount a proper response. I know the alliance is strong, Jake replied. I just wish we knew more about what we're facing. Dr. Collins approached from the command center, her face showing the strain of months of preparation. She had been promoted to Chief Science Officer for the entire defense operation, coordinating research teams from dozens of species. Jake, the scout reports are coming in, she said. You need to see this. They moved to the main command center, where representatives from every major species worked side by side. Dr. Veltar coordinated sensor data while Representative Vex managed fleet movements. The sight still amazed Jake. Former enemies working together with the efficiency that none of them could have achieved alone. The main display showed the latest intelligence from the deep space scouts. What they saw defied easy description, a massive, organized force that seemed to be part machine, part organism, and entirely hostile to life as the galaxy knew it. We're calling them devourers, Dr. Collins explained. They consume all organic matter and convert it into more of themselves. They've already processed 17 star systems on the outer rim. Storm's electromagnetic pattern shifted to something Jake had never seen before, a mixture of ancient memory and present determination. The Great Pack remembers stories from the deep past, tales of the dark tide that drove the first builders to hide beneath the earth of dead worlds. You've encountered these things before, Jake asked. Not encountered, Storm clarified. But the oldest pack memories speak of a time when the galaxy went dark for 1,000 years. When the star paths were empty and only the hidden survived. Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Force studied the tactical displays with grim concentration. Our combined fleets number over 10,000 ships. But the enemy force, she shook her head. We're looking at millions of units, and they keep growing as they consume more matter. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. 2 years ago, he had just been a ship captain trying to understand a dangerous creature. Now he found himself helping to coordinate the defense of an entire galaxy. "What are our advantages?" he asked. Swift Current, Storm's offspring, who had grown into a skilled tactical analyst, pulsed with excited patterns. Human innovation, Vorthak adaptability, crystalline precision, ethereal wisdom. Separately, each species faced this threat and failed. Together, we create new possibilities. The next several hours were spent in intense planning. The combined knowledge of 47 species had produced technologies that none of them could have imagined alone. Ships that could phase through solid matter using ethereal techniques. Weapons that could manipulate electromagnetic fields on a stellar scale using Vorthak knowledge. Targeting systems that combined human-computer. Processing with crystalline mathematical precision. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. "I've been analyzing the scout data," announced Dr. Veltar, his 4 hands dancing over multiple control interfaces. "The Devourers have a weakness. They require organic neural patterns to coordinate their attacks. Without those patterns, they become random, unorganized." Jake studied the data. "You're saying they need to capture and convert intelligent beings to maintain their structure?" "Precisely. And according to Storm's historical records, this is why they failed the first time. They consumed all available intelligence too quickly and became unable to coordinate their own forces. Storm's patterns shifted to something that might have been hope. But this time the galaxy is more populous. More species, more intelligence to sustain them longer. Unless we give them something they can't digest," Jake said thoughtfully. "Something that would disrupt their neural networks instead of strengthening them." Dr. Collins looked up from her workstation with sudden excitement. "Jake, what if we could create a kind of virus? Not biological, but informational. Something that would spread through their neural networks and cause chaos instead of coordination." "A mental virus," Swift Current pulsed with enthusiasm. "Vorthak electromagnetic patterns could carry such information directly into their systems." The plan that emerged over the following days was audacious, even by the standards of this unprecedented alliance. Instead of trying to destroy the Devourer fleet through force, they would attempt to turn the enemy's greatest strength against itself. Teams of humans, Vorthaks, and crystalline mathematicians worked around the clock to design an information pattern that would appear to be normal neural activity, but would actually corrupt any system that tried to process it. It was like creating a computer virus, but for living minds. "The delivery system is the challenge," Admiral Chen explained during the final briefing. "We need to get close enough to inject this pattern into their network, but anything that gets too close gets consumed." Storm's patterns shifted to calm determination. "Vorthaks will carry the pattern. We can survive in space without ships. We can approach without being detected as technology." Jake felt a chill of understanding. "You're talking about a suicide mission." "Not suicide," Storm corrected gently. "Evolution. For thousands of years, Vorthaks have adapted to survive. Now we adapt to save others." The battle began 3 days later as the Devourer fleet reached the outer defensive perimeter. Jake watched from Unity's edge as thousands of ships from dozens of species engaged an enemy, unlike anything they had ever faced. The Devourers were massive, organic mechanical hybrids that consumed everything they touched and grew stronger with each victory. Traditional weapons barely slowed them down, and any ship that got too close was absorbed into their mass. But the real battle was happening on a level that couldn't be seen by conventional sensors. Throughout the combat zone, Vorthaks moved like living electromagnetic storms, their patterns carrying the virus deeper into enemy territory. Pattern injection. "Successful," reported Dr. Collins. "The virus is spreading through their neural network." Jake watched the tactical display as something remarkable happened. The coordinated Devourer attack began to falter. Units started moving in random directions. Some began attacking their own forces. The perfect organization that had made them unstoppable was collapsing into chaos. "It's working," Admiral Chen announced. "Enemy coordination is breaking down across the entire fleet." But the victory came at a cost. Many of the Vorthaks who had carried the virus deep into enemy territory didn't return. They had given their lives to save species that had once hunted them as animals. Storm's patterns were subdued as the battle ended. The Great Pack mourns those who joined the deep current, but their sacrifice has meaning. The galaxy survives. Jake placed his hand on Storm's flank, feeling the gentle pulse of electromagnetic patterns that had become as familiar as his own heartbeat. Storm, I want you to know something. When I first stepped into that cage with you, I never imagined it would lead to this. Human friend Jake changed everything, Storm replied. By choosing trust over fear, you taught the galaxy a new way to see. The beast that could not be tamed became the teacher that could not be ignored. As Jake looked out at the debris field where the Devourer fleet had been, he realized that this victory was about more than just survival. It was proof that understanding and cooperation could triumph over seemingly impossible odds. The creature that everyone had dismissed as a mindless predator had helped save the galaxy. The human who had chosen trust over fear had become the bridge between species, and together, they had shown that sometimes the most dangerous monsters weren't the ones with claws and teeth, but the ones who refused to see the intelligence in others. In the months that followed, as the galaxy rebuilt and expanded its cooperation, Jake often returned to that original moment of choice, when the alien had warned that the beast couldn't be tamed and he had stepped forward anyway. It turned out that some beasts didn't need taming. They just needed understanding. And sometimes, if you were brave enough to offer that understanding, they might just save your entire civilization in return. Storm's electromagnetic patterns pulsed gently beside him, and Jake smiled. The real adventure had just begun.